In 1985, an FBI hostage negotiator named Gary Nosner sat across from a man holding 3 hostages at gunpoint. The man was screaming, making demands, spiraling. Every instinct said to respond, to reason, to talk him down. But Nosner did something that shocked everyone in the room. He said nothing. He held eye contact. He waited. 4 seconds of absolute silence. Then the gunman paused. His breathing slowed. And he started talking, not yelling. Talking. That silence saved 3 lives. Most people would have panicked. Most people are terrified of silence. We rush to fill every pause, every gap, every uncomfortable moment with words. We say things we do not mean just to avoid the discomfort of saying nothing. But the most powerful people in history understood something that most of us never learn. Silence is not the absence of communication. It is the most intense form of it. Today we are breaking down 5 situations where silence is the most powerful response you can give, backed by psychology research, FBI negotiation tactics, and real-world examples. And we will also cover the dark side. Because silence can be used to heal, but it can also be used to destroy. Situation 1. When someone disrespects you. Your coworker makes a sarcastic comment in a meeting. Someone insults you in front of others. A stranger says something designed to provoke you. Every fiber of your body wants to respond, to defend yourself, to match their energy. But here is what happens when you stay silent instead. The person who threw the insult is now standing in their own mess. They expected a reaction. They prepared for one. Your silence creates a vacuum, and that vacuum forces everyone in the room to process what just happened. The insult hangs in the air with no counterattack to distract from it. Research from the University of Michigan found that people who pause before responding to provocation are perceived as more confident, more competent, and more in control than those who respond immediately. The study showed that silence after an insult triggers what psychologists call the expectancy violation effect. The aggressor expected a fight. They did not get one. This disrupts their mental script and forces them to recalculate. Most of the time, they back down. The practical rule is simple. When someone disrespects you, give yourself a 3-second pause. Look at them. Say nothing. Let the silence do the work. You do not owe anyone a reaction. Situation 2. When you are negotiating. Chris Voss spent 24 years as the FBI's lead international kidnapping negotiator. He negotiated with bank robbers, terrorists, and hostage takers in over 150 cases. His #1 technique was not clever arguments or threats. It was silence. In his book, Never Split the Difference, Voss describes a technique called dynamic silence. After making a statement or asking a question, you wait at least 4 seconds without speaking. You do not nod. You do not make encouraging sounds. You simply wait. Why does this work? Because silence creates psychological pressure that no words can match. When you are silent, the other person feels compelled to fill the void, and when people feel silence, they reveal information. They make concessions. They say things they were not planning to say. A 2022 study from MIT Sloan found that when negotiators used strategic pauses of at least 3 seconds, both parties achieved better outcomes. The silence forced what researchers called a deliberative mindset. Instead of reacting, both sides started thinking more carefully. The next time you are negotiating a salary, a deal, or even deciding where to eat dinner, try this. State your position, then stop talking. Then stop talking. The discomfort you feel in those 4 seconds is nothing compared to the power you gain. Situation 3. When you are in an argument. There is a rule that experienced lawyers know, experienced therapists know, and experienced poker players know. In any conflict, the person who speaks first after a pause loses. When 2 people are arguing, emotions escalate with every exchange. Each response adds fuel. The argument gains momentum, not because the content matters, but because the rhythm of attack and counterattack becomes automatic. You stop thinking and start reacting. Silence breaks that rhythm instantly. When you go quiet in the middle of an argument, the other person is suddenly arguing with themselves. Their words have nowhere to land. The momentum dies. Research published in the Journal of Experimental Social Psychology found that even a brief silence of 2 seconds in a heated exchange reduces emotional arousal by up to 30%. Your prefrontal cortex, the rational brain, gets a chance to come back online. This does not mean you give someone the silent treatment. That is different, and we will get to that. This means you consciously choose to pause before responding. You take a breath. You let the other person finish. Then you wait 3 seconds before saying anything. The power of this technique is that it forces you to respond rather than react. Reacting is emotional, responding is strategic, and the gap between the two is silence. Situation 4. When you need to understand yourself. We live in the noisiest era in human history. The average person consumes over 11 hours of media per day. We wake up to notifications. We fall asleep to podcasts. We fill every commute, every walk, every meal with sound. And most of us have no idea who we are because we have never been quiet long enough to find out. A study from the University of Virginia made headlines when it found that 67% of men and 25% of women chose to give themselves electric shocks rather than sit alone in silence for 15 minutes. People would rather inflict pain on themselves than be alone with their own thoughts. This is not a failure of willpower. It is a failure of practice. We have not trained ourselves to be comfortable in silence. But here is what the research shows happens when you do. A study published in the journal Heart found that 2 minutes of silence produced more physical relaxation than listening to relaxing music. Silence lowered blood pressure, reduced cortisol, and increased blood flow to the brain more effectively than any sound tested. The neuroscience goes deeper. When you are in silence, your brain activates what is called the default mode network. This is the neural system responsible for self-reflection, memory consolidation, and creative insight. It only activates fully when external stimulation stops. Every great thinker, from Einstein to Darwin to Nikola Tesla, built deliberate silence into their daily routines. Not because they were antisocial, because they understood that the mind needs silence to process what it has learned. Situation 5. The dark side. When silence becomes a weapon. Everything we have discussed so far is about strategic, intentional silence that serves you and the people around you. But there is another form of silence that destroys, the silent treatment. This is when someone withdraws all communication as punishment. They stop responding to texts. They refuse to acknowledge your presence. They pretend you do not exist. Not for 3 seconds, not for 4 seconds. For hours, days, sometimes weeks. A 2026 study published in Frontiers in Psychology found that 70% of people in unhealthy relationships experience the silent treatment regularly. The study found that it activates the same neural pathways as physical pain. The anterior cingulate cortex, the brain region that processes social rejection, lights up identically whether you are punched or ignored. The silent treatment works as manipulation because it exploits your need for resolution. You cannot argue with silence. You cannot defend yourself against nothing, so you start guessing. What did I do wrong? How can I fix this? The person using the silent treatment does not need to say a word. Your own brain tortures you on their behalf. The difference between powerful silence and manipulative silence is simple. Powerful silence is a pause before a response. Manipulative silence is the absence of a response. Powerful silence lasts seconds. Manipulative silence lasts days. Powerful silence invites reflection. Manipulative silence demands submission. If someone is using the silent treatment on you, name it. Say, I notice you have stopped communicating with me. I am willing to talk when you are ready, but I will not guess what I did wrong. That sentence takes their weapon away because the silent treatment only works when you chase. So here is the framework for using silence in your own life. 3 seconds after a disrespect, do not react. Let the silence expose what was said. 4 seconds in a negotiation. State your position and wait. Let them fill the void. 2 seconds in an argument. Pause before you respond. Let your rational brain catch up to your emotions. 15 minutes of daily silence. No phone, no music, no input. Let your default mode network do its work. And 0 tolerance for the silent treatment. Name it. Refuse to chase. Protect your peace. The loudest person in the room is rarely the most powerful. The person everyone watches is the one who speaks last, speaks least, and lets silence carry the weight of everything left unsaid. Master silence, and you master the room.